Welcome to this third video recording for the journey that you are making on writing a proposal. I hope that you've enjoyed and tested out the first two, writing a rationale, sharing it with others, and most importantly with yourself. And the second is starting upon identifying the articles and books and the major people who have contributed to your field and that you are now ready to go on to the next stage. So the next stage is the process of actual reading, and like the others, I have divided that into 4 or 5 important components. Let me start with the first one, and that you make sure that you write a note for everything that you are going to do, that you are going to think about. Make sure that you write it somewhere. And I introduced you to using EndNote, or you can use any other bibliographic program, but everything that you read, everything that you are surveying, you immediately try to write it down. You can even write it down in your phone if you don't have your computer at hand. Maybe write it on a note and then take it on and make sure that it is stored. So that is a record that you start building up. The second important part is that once you've identified the set of materials from JSTOR, from ATLA, from other sources that you have got together from the encyclopedias and edited books, you set up a collection and you write it out. Again, it's something that is sitting on your EndNote. It is a special group that you want to start reading as such. And what you do is that you mark your progress. When you have read something, maybe from David Chidester, you like it, maybe you read something else that is related to the fields, try to mark your progress. Try to say, okay, this is I've done now, this is what I have to do here. Tell yourself, maybe you have to read something every day. I'm not saying read a book every day, but at least you should write an article every day. I think less than that is not possible. And you'll be amazed if you think about it. If you think about Monday to Friday, then at least you should read 5 substantial articles, or maybe start with a book as a week, and mark that progress. It is a really great feeling to know that now you have done this. You've got, you started off with a collection of 40, you've done 10 or so, or 5 or so. You know, more or less, you need another couple of weeks to go through this, and you mark the progress and pat yourself on the back when you have made that. The third one is that you start now opening this text and you start reading it. And I think that consists of two important steps. The first is a general survey of what a particular article or book has to do. So the first part of it, I'm going to speak distinctly about the first part, which is a very important part, or actually deciding whether you want to read an article or not. You have to make this a conscious decision. Don't read it because your supervisor gives it to you, or because you think everybody else is reading it. You do a survey. You've decided that this article or book falls part of your field, and you really need to look at it. But you look again in the first step. You basically look again at it, and you try to evaluate whether it is worth the time going into the material. So you look carefully at the article. What does the article say about your field? What does it talk to you? How does it say something to you? Is it something worth reading? The next thing you read is a good idea. If it is a book, read the whole introduction and the conclusion. If it's an article, read the introductory paragraphs and then the concluding paragraphs. And you ask yourself, is it telling you something about the field? Is it making a sort of a substantial contribution to what you know is the field is all about? Is it worth reading? Is it presenting an argument? Is it presenting a survey? Now, whenever you answer that question, yes, it is a survey, remember, you make a note of it, right? You write a note of it. If it is a critical review, you're not so sure whether it is a good one or not so good, you still write it. It's a critical review of the field that you would like to read it. It's a criticism of somebody else, for example, a major person that has been written. It's a review of a major book that has been written. Again, you write it down. So the first step is basically an assessment whether an article or a book or something is worth your while. And you make that judgment upon a close inspection of the introduction, the conclusion, the individual chapters, and you begin to get a sense of what this person is about, what this article or book is all about, without actually reading it in detail. That first step, sometimes it might take you 5 minutes. If you're reading a short article, it might take you half an hour to consider the book, but spend that time. Make sure that you have spent the time and then you tick it off, okay, this is something I'm going to read. Then the fourth step is actually to reading the article itself. That's when you've already made a general assessment. Now you start reading very, very clearly about, and you ask yourself, 2 or 3 questions. I've normally said, the first thing you ask yourself, now you're starting to read it, you've already got an assessment, but now when you're starting to read your assessment, you keep 3 questions in mind. What is the thesis of this article? Fundamentally, right from the beginning, you keep on asking yourself, you read a paragraph, okay, on the basis of this, what is being said? On the basis of this, what is being said? And by the end of the book, you should be very, very clear, or the end of the article, okay, this is what the thesis of the book is all about. It's a simple statement. It might require 2 sentences or 3 sentences. It might require you to write a paragraph. Write it down in your endnote. But you're getting that assessment reading the whole book. But you keep that uppermost in mind. Don't ever deviate from it. As soon as you start seeing a person, okay, this person is saying this to me, and I have to listen to this, I have to keep in mind, I have to keep that in mind. Is the person? Then the second question that you ask yourself in relation to the first is, how is this person doing it? What is the data that the person is using? Is the person using a theoretical framework? 2 main questions. What is the theoretical framework? What is the data? What is the methodology that is being employed? Ask yourself throughout the paper, what is the data? Is there some great data? Or is this person just sucking, actually not just inventing an idea? Is this person just simply basing on identifiable data, that facts that you have, that you can identify, that you can think about? What is the data? Or is it just an argument based on not really clearly identifiable facts? You ask yourself the question as you are reading the. So you know what is the thesis, and you know what is the thesis based on. Is it? And then you, at the end of the day, the third question you ask yourself is this: what is the? Is this a good paper? Is this a good paper in relation to what the author tried to do? What has he or she managed to do with the data that is available? What is your general assessment of them? Not what you want to do with it, but an assessment of that field. That is it. That's a very, very important step in reading. First of all, make sure that you are writing everything. Secondly, you mark your progress. When you finished, when you are writing something, when you are reading something and you finished reading something, make sure that you mark your progress. Give yourself a pat on the back to say, well, now you've achieved this. The third thing is that you survey the article. Make sure that you have a general assessment where you make a decision for yourself whether it is a good paper that promises something worthwhile that you want to read, based on a careful reading of the title, of the introduction and the conclusion, and maybe an assessment of the individual subheadings. And the fourth step is you actually do the reading. You read it carefully. After you've assessed it, you now start reading it. And you're reading it with at least 3 concerns in your mind. What is the thesis? How is this thesis developed? On the basis of what data? On the basis of what theoretical framework? Those are important questions. And then your assessment about whether this is something that I would like to maybe value, it is something that is helpful to me, it is an article, what is the author has managed to do, has managed to advance the knowledge in a particular direction. Do that with every piece of article, every article or every book that you read. That is your literature survey. Before you know, you will have a vast body from which you can then begin to develop your narrative. I thank you as always for your attention.